This is The Chris Berry Show. Expert information on wealth, estate, and tax planning for the second half of life. Information that you can understand. Here's your host, Chris Berry.
Welcome to The Chris Berry Show, where we talk wealth, estate, and tax planning for the second half of life. And this is your host, Chris Berry. And each week we start with a positive focus, something positive that happened within the last week. And it's something that I started with my family. We'd go around the dinner table and share something positive, whether it was Ryan talking about what he did at recess, or my daughter Madison talking about dance class, or maybe they talked about a new move they learned in their jiu-jitsu class. But I think it's a great way to start the show off each week on a positive focus. And for me, the positive focus is going to be a work one, where we have our firm about 2 weeks ago wrapped up getting as many VA applications as possible in. We set a record for our firm. Because if you remember, we talked about this change in the world of VA benefits planning. So if you're a veteran or surviving spouse, we were able to get you qualified for an extra $1,000 to $2,000 a month to help pay for those long-term care costs. Well, the VA made a change, and they put a 3-year kind of look-back period on that, where depending on the nature of your assets, you might now have to wait 3 years to qualify to bring in that benefit. And unfortunately, the only people this hurts are the veterans and surviving spouses. But our firm, as a VA-accredited attorney, the previous 10 years, we've been helping families get qualified for this VA benefit. And usually we'd help 2 to 4 families a month get qualified. Well, with this change looming, we had about a month to get all of those claims in. And so we got about 15 claims in that time, and our team really came together to put all of that, to help those families to get those claims in so that they could receive that extra money from the VA. Because I feel if you've served our country, or if your spouse has served that country, then this is a benefit that's available to you, and you should be able to have access to it. And too often I feel like the VA puts roadblocks between veterans and their benefits. And so it's our job as a VA-accredited firm to help those veterans get qualified for this much-needed benefit. So my positive focus is that the team really came together and was able to help a lot of families get their applications in before this change in rules. So that was my positive focus. And I invite our listeners to think about doing that around their dinner tables each night, to do a positive focus, because I really think we need more positivity in the world. So that's the positive focus. Now, on the Chris Berry Show this week, I'm very excited. We're going to have Kathy Shaffer, a very special expert guest, talking about the long-term care journey, the elder care journey. She has years of experience, and I'm not going to give away how many years of experience, but she has years of experience helping families as it comes to understanding the role of home care and assisted living. And so Kathy, in our next segment, is going to get into her story, her history. And I've known Kathy for probably over 10 years, so I'm excited to bring her on the show and have her talk about her journey in helping families with their elder care and long-term care journey. And then in our third segment, what we're going to do is we're going to get into some questions and answers, questions our listeners have submitted, and we'll take a shot at answering those on air. And if you do have questions, you can call us anytime at 810-355-2584, or you can email us anytime at askchris@thechrisberryshow.com. And we'll read those questions on air and provide some guidance and answers. Now, you might be thinking, well, gosh, I wish I could see Chris and his team live and ask these questions directly to him face-to-face. Well, if you are interested in that, we do have workshops at one of our Metro Detroit locations about once a week, whether it's Novi, Bloomfield Hills, Brighton, or our offices in Ann Arbor and Lansing. So if you do want more information on that, you can go to thechrisberryshow.com. And if you look in the upper right corner, there's a spot that says register for upcoming workshop. So space is limited. We're limited to about 20 individuals at these workshops, so you do need to RSVP. And please only RSVP if you can make it, because a lot of times these workshops fill up, and typically we're at one of our office locations just maybe once a month, so it might be another month before we're able to open up another workshop in that city. But again, we have these once a week at one of our different locations, whether it's Brighton, Novi, Livonia, Bloomfield Hills, Ann Arbor, or Lansing. And again, you can register for these by giving us a call at 810-355-2584, or go to thechrisberryshow.com, and in the upper right there's a spot where it says workshop registration. Now, in this segment, with Halloween approaching us, what I wanted to do was talk about 10 scary estate planning mistakes. So these are gruesome, scary estate planning mistakes that we've seen in our over 10 years of doing this. And I have young children, so they're all excited about Halloween. Halloween's probably one of their favorite holidays, actually, where basically as soon as school starts, they think it's Halloween season. So they'd rush down and get all of the Halloween decorations out. And my son Ryan, my daughter Madison, they just love Halloween. One of their favorite activities is when we're out and about is stop by the Halloween store. So they're always as soon as the Halloween stores open up, and you see them, it's crazy. They close down, and then the end of summer, all of a sudden, all these Halloween shops pop up. And Ryan and Maddie, they know where all of the Halloween stores are within like a 20-mile radius. So whenever we're driving by, they want to stop. But they were real quick to get out the Halloween decorations this year. And so we have a bunch of these little plastic mice and bats just throughout the house. Chances are we're going to be finding Halloween bats even after we clean up, probably through Christmas and into next Halloween. But they love Halloween. My daughter, Madison, she wants to be a birthday cake this year for Halloween. She's 5. I thought that was an interesting choice. And so we have a birthday cake costume for her. And then my son, Ryan, he wants to be a Black Panther. Apparently that's all the rage right now. So as of right now, he's going to be the Black Panther, but that could certainly change by Halloween. We still have a couple days before that. But with our listeners, I thought I would share 10 scary estate planning mistakes. And the first one is dying intestate. So dying without any type of estate plan, dying without a will. This is scary because you're sending your loved ones to probate court. And we know that we want to avoid probate because it's costly, it's time-consuming, and it's public. Anyone can see what's going through the probate process. On average, 3 to 5% of any assets going through probate get eaten up in costs. So we know that we want to avoid probate, and if you die without a will or any type of other estate planning, state of Michigan has a plan for you, and it's a pretty scary plan because now your affairs are going through court. By statute in Michigan, it takes at least 5 months to go through the probate process. So you're in that scary, spooky court situation where you're leaving your affairs up to a judge for at least 5 months if you end up going through probate. So we know that probate is scary. We know that we want to avoid that. So you don't want to go through probate. And so that's the first mistake we need to avoid is dying intestate. Now, the second scary estate planning mistake is having a basic I love you will. So a lot of people think a will avoids probate, but unfortunately it does not. That's one of those big misconceptions that if you have a will, you're going to avoid probate court. Unfortunately, you're not. All the will does is gives instructions to the probate court on how to handle your affairs. So you're basically telling that scary judge, hey, I'm going to give you instructions and where my stuff goes, and then the judge follows your instructions. So if you want to avoid probate, relying on a will probably isn't the best way because, again, a will does not avoid probate. All that a will does is gives instructions to probate court on how to administer your estate. So you're still going through that scary, spooky probate process, even if you have just a basic will. So first mistake, dying intestate. The second scary estate planning mistake is having an I love you will, just a basic, simple will-based estate plan. And that brings me to the third mistake, the third scary estate planning mistake. And the third scary estate planning mistake is giving property outright to your children. So this could be a bad reason for two, or this could be problematic for two reasons. The first reason is they might make poor financial choices. So, for example, my children, Ryan and Maddie, right now they're 8 and 5. And if you were to leave any money to them, they're going to spend all that money on probably Halloween costumes right now. Spend it all at the Halloween store. which would be pretty fun. And they've tried to pick out some pretty expensive Halloween decorations, but that's probably not the best use of that money. And then the second reason is not just to protect them from their own poor financial mismanagement, but we also need to protect them from the outside environment. So the world out there can be pretty scary with lawsuits and divorces and everything on the rise. By leaving things to them in trust, we can protect them from the divorces, lawsuits, creditor action, bankruptcy, and make sure the money stays in the family versus going to the in-laws, who we call the outlaws. So scary estate planning mistake number 3 is giving property outright to your children. Scary estate planning mistake number 4 is owning property jointly with anyone other than a spouse. So joint ownership is great for a married couple, but I would not recommend naming anyone else jointly on any of your accounts because you're opening yourself up to all the potential liabilities of that person. So if they were to get in a car accident and they're named jointly on your bank account or your house, you might lose that asset, and that would be pretty darn scary and disappointing. So we don't want to do that. So joint ownership is great for a married couple. I would not recommend naming anyone else jointly on your accounts. There's always a better way to do it. And that brings us to scary estate planning mistake number 5, not having a trust. Now, not everyone needs a trust, but a trust is one of the most effective estate planning tools depending on what your goals are. For example, with a trust, we can avoid probate. We can control the distribution upon death, and we can even build in asset protection for your beneficiaries as well as for yourself, depending on the type of trust that we set out. So if you want to avoid probate, control the distribution upon death, and build in asset protection even for you or your loved ones, then you might want to look at a trust. And so that is scary estate planning mistake number 5, not having a trust. Which brings us to scary estate planning mistake number 6, and that's not funding your trust. So let's say you have created a trust, you've went through that process, and now you have a trust. Maybe you have a castle trust, which is a form of asset protection trust, or a living trust, which does not provide asset protection but can avoid probate upon death. Well, think of a trust kind of like a suitcase. You need to make sure that there's stuff actually in the suitcase. Or a better example would be as my children are going around trick-or-treating in a couple days, they want to make sure that their pillowcases are full of candy. So if we look at a trust kind of like that pillowcase, we need to make sure that there's stuff in that pillowcase. We need to make sure that it's funded with candy. Well, similarly, with your trust, we need to make sure that there's assets in your trust. Think of that as the candy in your pillowcase. So if you just have an empty trust, all you're doing is you're passing an empty pillowcase to your children and beneficiaries. There's no candy in it. There's no assets in it. So scary mistake number 6 is having that pillowcase without candy, or in legal terms, not funding your trust. Mistake number 7 is not having your documents reviewed and updated. So estate planning is a world of changing laws, changing taxes, and we're going to have an expert coming on in a couple episodes, or actually next week, Matt Silva, November 4th, he's going to talk, he's a CPA, he's going to talk about some of the tax changes. So understand the world is always changing, and we need to make sure that we review our estate plan on a regular basis to make sure it's keeping up with the changes in law, changes in taxes, changes in asset. So it's kind of similar to my children when they come home with their candy. We always have to review the candy, see what we have, make sure everything looks good. Now, the great thing about my kids is they're not big sugar lovers, and we try to minimize the candy in our house. So a lot of times what we do is we donate that. Actually, their orthodontist and dentist will buy back the candy, which is kind of nice. So number 7, review their estate plan. You need to make sure that your documents are reviewed on a regular basis. So scary mistake number 7 is not having your documents reviewed and updated. Scary mistake number 8 is not planning for what happens if you don't die. So a lot of people think estate planning is just planning for what happens if you pass away. Well, what happens if you don't pass away? And I'm not talking about turning into a zombie or a ghost. What I'm talking about is continuing to live and face all the issues that go along with aging, whether you're diagnosed with Alzheimer's, dementia, or face long-term care costs. So estate planning, it's not just about where your stuff goes upon death, but we need to have a plan for life as well. So we need to take into account some of these kind of elder law issues that we've talked about, planning for long-term care costs, making sure we have a personal care plan document, which gives instructions on how best to care for us if we were to need long-term care. So, scary estate planning mistake number 8, not planning for what happens if you don't die. And again, we're not talking about turning into a zombie or a spooky ghost. What we're talking about is the elder law issues. And that brings us to scary estate planning mistake number 9, thinking a living trust alone is enough. And well, estate plan isn't just about a trust or a will, it's about having those ancillary documents, things like financial and medical powers of attorney, in personal care plans, making sure that we've done a deed for the home. So there's more than just a trust or a will that goes into a comprehensive estate plan. And that's scary mistake number 9, thinking a living trust alone is enough. Which brings us to our last scary estate planning mistake. And it's understanding that the biggest problem is not the IRS, it's not probate, it's ourselves. It's procrastination. A lot of people put off having their estate planning done, but you never know when life's going to throw you a curveball. Whether you're diagnosed with Alzheimer's, dementia, you have a loved one pass away, it's not fun to think about. We try to make it fun on this show, talking about these mistakes from a Halloween perspective, but we understand it's easy to procrastinate on talking about death, incapacity, and taxes. But it's important to sit down with a professional. It's important to get your estate plan done. So that's scary estate planning mistake number 10, not understanding that the biggest problem is not the IRS, it's procrastination. So I hope you enjoyed that. I want to wish everyone a happy Halloween. Hopefully you have more treats than tricks. And join me in the next segment as we bring in Kathy Shaffer talking about the long-term care journey, the elder care journey. It's going to be worthwhile listening. So join us shortly.
Certified elder law attorney Chris Berry from the Elder Care Firm in Brighton can help you protect your assets from the cost of long-term care, and they can also help you with estate planning, like they did for Linda Emerson.
I had to redo my will. It weighed on me that I hadn't changed it. I wanted to make everything easy for my daughter whenever I do keel over. But I went in, it was very professional, and sat down with Chris. I would definitely suggest him because he knows his stuff and he's not aggressive. He's, very friendly and makes you feel comfortable because I think he realizes it's not a comfortable thing for people. It was just an easy process. I came out of it and I told my daughter, "It's all yours, kiddo."
Hello, I'm attorney Chris Berry. The Elder Care Firm is here to help you and your family find solutions. Call us today.
Visit theeldercarefirm.com today or call 810-214-3800, 810-214-3800.
All right, welcome back to the Chris Berry Show. This is Chris Berry, your host, where we talk wealth, estate, and tax planning for the second half of life. And as promised, I'm very excited to bring on a guest, a very special guest. I've known this guest for a number of years now. It's probably over 5, maybe 10 years now. And her name's Kathy Shaffer. So welcome, Kathy.
Thanks, Chris. I'm glad to be here.
So, Kathy, why don't you share a little bit about where you're at now, what you're doing now?
Well, I'm the sales manager at Brookdale in Novi, which is a senior living community that offers independent living with assistive services. And we also have within our portfolio memory care, building, other independence, and assisted living.
Awesome. And so what I think a lot of people are confused about, and if you mentioned kind of a couple different levels of care, is just what are the different levels of care that are available to seniors as they're going through the long-term care journey?
You're right. A lot of people don't know what they're looking for when they start looking. Obviously, independent living is the first step for many people, and that is usually 55 and over or 62 and over. Depends on the community, whether they have assisted services available in the building. There is true assisted living where people need support with activities of daily living and meals and things that, they aren't able to do for themselves anymore. After that, typically it's memory care, and that's for people that have some sort of irreversible memory loss, whether it's dementia from Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's or other issues that have created the memory loss. And then next step, and usually the final step, is long-term care. If someone needs skilled nursing, which really means that they need 24-hour nursing support or assistance, not just supervision.
Sure, yeah. And so I find that a lot of people have the most confusion between the difference between independent and assisted living. It seems to me the lines are starting to gray there. Can you talk on that, or maybe help people understand?
They definitely are, and I think that especially when it comes to a couple, sometimes there is someone that needs supportive services and their spouse or someone else in the family isn't able to care for them any longer. We all know how stressful that is. So they come to a community like ours where we provide those additional services. The one that isn't in need of services can live very independently and still enjoy, a quality of life while their loved one is still with them, but not, able to do the things, and so they are having someone else help them with those things. In a true assisted living, typically they aren't full apartments. They would be more studio-type apartments, a little bit more clinical environment.
Sure, yeah. And now, we've talked about these different levels of care. I assume there's different costs associated with these, right?
Yes, there's definitely different costs. And there's also, as an entry into a community, often there's an entry fee, and those vary on what they cover, what they do. Some of your continuing care retirement communities have an entrance fee that actually guarantees them a home for life, which is a little more complicated to get into. Others have a marketing fee or a community fee that is more like a security deposit or just sets them up for, their living situation. The rest of the costs do vary depending on whether it's just basically room and board and utilities, whether we're providing, meals, housekeeping. Assisted living it includes all of those things in the cost. Sometimes there's a level of care that will change based on the care needs of the person. And then from then on, it's increases.
Yeah. And so for a lot of people, the cost of long-term care can be surprising. Can we give some maybe ranges in terms of the care, just so that our listeners have some idea?
Sure. Well, my apartments for one person with all the services that we provide start at about $2,400, and that's a one-bedroom apartment, and then go upwards from there. Assisted living for one person, depending again on the level of care, sort of basic, just needs some general assistance, I would level off at about $3,000. And memory care, much higher because it's 24-hour support, secure community, and probably the most cost-effective that would be offered in this area would be about $5,000. And then long-term care starts anywhere at $10,000 and all the way upwards, depending on the care again.
Sure, yeah. And so how do you see people paying for this care? Because paying $2,000 to $4,000, $5,000, $8,000, $10,000 a month, how do we go about paying for that? What's been your experience?
Well, it's very difficult for a lot of people. And even though they've done everything right through the years, to have that kind of money to support a loved one is difficult. And it is, for the most part, private pay. Medicare covers rehabilitation for residents. However, the rest is primarily private pay. We do have options of veterans benefits that I know you're familiar with and can be a wonderful addition to people's income. If they had the forethought of getting long-term care insurance at some point, yes, there are benefits from that, but not in independent living and sometimes in assisted living. So, there are some options out there for people to secure. There's some Medicaid waivers that may be available. We do offer those at our community. They're hard to come by, though. They have to have, the right criteria and they have to have already applied, and there's 6 to 12-month wait,
Yeah,
or something like that.
Yeah, that's what we've experienced with the waiver program. Is that it sounds great, and there should be more services available to help keep people in the least restrictive type of care possible. But too often, there's only services available for nursing home, not assisted living with memory care, or even independent living. So
Well, and I think unfortunately, because people are waiting because the cost is so prohibitive, when we're getting people even into our independent community, they're possibly beyond the care that we can provide, and they're vulnerable and they're at risk in their homes. And it's a very difficult position to be in.
Well, and I think you bring up a good point of it. One of the biggest questions is just determining when you're ready to make that jump into moving from home to independent living. Like, how do families know when they're ready? I get that question all the time of what's the next step?
The biggest challenge for me in working with families is when there is someone that has dementia, because that person can no longer make that decision, yet families want them to buy in, and they're not going to. Most of my residents, whether it's assisted living or memory care, aren't going to say they want to move at that point in their lives, but they don't understand the need. And families have a real hard time sometimes, taking the ball and running with it and saying, no, this is what you need to do. And so there's a lot of conflict there. There's a lot of denial. And I think you have to trust people like myself to say, these are the things that, your mom or your dad or your spouse needs. And a lot of it goes down to the care and stress that's put on the person caring for them. Because there's a statistic out there that says that a third of caregivers pass away before the person that they're caring for. And, that's pretty significant. That's very scary. And I've had that happen in my own family.
Sure. Yeah. That caregiver burnout, that's one of the things, especially with married couples, where the spouse providing the care ends up needing more care than the spouse receiving care because they're so selfless.
And there's, this vow or promise that they've made to people that they're married to or family members that says, I'll never do that to you. But you can't always keep that, and it's not always best for someone. The other thing that's challenging is there's a big difference sometimes between what a person needs in terms of care and what family wants for them. Sometimes they will see, the big, glitzy, brand new community that, is lots of money, but they aren't necessarily doing the right thing because maybe they haven't done this kind of business for 40 years or 50 years. They're more developers. So the basic thing is a clean, consistent environment that the care is good. That's the bottom line, is who's caring for your loved one and how are they doing it.
So don't just look for the place with the biggest chandelier is what you're saying?
No, mom and dad don't necessarily need stainless steel appliances or granite countertops.
Sure.
But that's something that's become very prevalent in our market recently.
Yeah. So I know you might not have a perfect answer, but if there is a family that thinks mom or dad needs to take the next step, do you have any tips or recommendations that you could make for them?
Well, I think that number one, the first thing is if you can convince them it's their idea, that's probably the best way to go about it. But that's not always going to happen. So I think that you just have to know your family member, and you have to guarantee them that you're doing what's best for them and give it a try. Many places will do a trial stay if that is what is necessary. Getting buy-in from people that they trust, in addition to maybe a clergyman, an attorney, a best friend, that they can take that financial or that responsibility off of the family to say, I really think this is what you need to do. Your kids are doing the right thing for you. Sure.
And so once maybe we get mom or dad on board with taking the next step or loved one, I see it seems like independent assisted living communities are popping up left and right. There's some roads where you drive every mile, and there's one even more than Starbucks, it seems like, right?
Well.
And you kind of touched upon this, but what should a family be looking for if they are ready to kind of transition to independent or assisted living?
Well, I think that, first of all, they're going to look at costs. They're going to look at services that are provided. Are the services provided by a consistent staff? Sometimes if there's caregivers in the building that aren't actually working for the community, then that's not consistent, and that's really important to people. Walk in anytime. You should be able to go in there anytime and take a look and talk to residents, talk to other family members, ask if they have ambassadors or resident advocates that would speak on how their care has been. And I think it's a lot of eyes and ears. I think doing the research, knowing what you're looking for, is really important to set yourself up for that success.
Sure, yeah. Now, this might seem like a silly question, but just something coming to mind for me. What happens to, let's say someone transitions to independent or assisted living. What kind of happens with all their stuff?
Oh, well, that's always fun. I usually recommend that people move in with what they think is absolutely what they need. And then it seems like down the road, a lot of times they realize that they don't need, grandma's typewriter from 1916 or whatever it happens to be. However, there are also organizers out there and realtors that can help with that downsizing. It's probably one of the hardest parts of that convincing that this is, it's time to go.
Sure.
You go from a 4-bedroom colonial to a 1-bedroom apartment, and that's spacious, but
yeah,
that's a big challenge. But they're not going to be cooking like they were before. They're not going to be entertaining. We have places in our community where they can entertain.
Yeah, and so I'm guessing a big problem you run into is just the idea of, especially for people of this generation, paying this much and what they might just attribute to rent, or going from being debt-free, mortgage-free, to all of a sudden paying.
Yeah, that is sometimes a challenge. I usually recommend that they make a list. Tell me everything that you're spending in your house on a monthly basis. And that includes if you need the roof fixed, and who's doing the lawn, and who's doing the grocery shopping for you, and snow removal, and all those things. And when they lay it all out, it makes sense to them to see that all those things that we're talking about, and sometimes it's even less than they might be, spending in their home. But that takes some convincing.
Sure, yeah. And I'm sure you probably run into this issue too. And it's, I even see this, I looked in the mirror the other day, I'm like, whoa, boy, did I get old all of a sudden. Do you ever run into issues where people don't want to be in kind of these older communities?
Oh, absolutely. I don't want to live with old people.
Right.
My dad, who you have met,
sure, of course.
He's 91, and he's not an old person. I think he's one of the oldest people in his community, but he's not an old person. Bringing them in to see the population, have dinner or another meal, participate in an activity. They sort of think that, okay, maybe I am more like these people, but it really comes down to their mortality.
Sure.
They think that they're not like those people.
Sure.
And families have a real hard time with that, especially when someone has dementia, if they're younger. And, they don't need that. Why would they need that?
Yeah. Well, Kathy, I think this has been great, very helpful. What would you say the number one or two benefits of looking at independent or assisted living for a loved one? What do you think the best outcomes could be for them?
Well, the best outcomes are that they move into an environment that they can live the rest of their lives safely. Families have peace of mind of knowing that they don't have to be there every 10 minutes checking, and that they make they're socializing. Older people tend to get real isolated, and that they just have a quality of life that they weren't having prior to.
Awesome. And I appreciate you coming on the Chris Berry Show and sharing all that information. And if anyone has any follow-up questions, what's the best way to reach you?
My office number is 248-669-5330. That's Brookdale of Novi. And you can always call me on my cell, which is 248-533-5411.
Wonderful. And we'll have all that information on the website. So if you go to thechrisberryshow.com, you can gather Kathy's information in the show notes. If you do have any questions, if you do have a loved one that's looking to transition from living at home to independent or even more care, reach out to Kathy, and her information will again be at the website, thechrisberryshow.com, where you can take a look at the show notes. And join us on the next segment as we get into some of your questions and answers. Thank you.
If you or a loved one is facing long-term care costs, make sure you talk with certified elder law attorney Chris Berry from the Elder Care Firm, like Jennifer did from Howell.
This past summer, my mom had to transition into a nursing home. So we contacted Chris to help get things in order. You know, I wanted the best. I wanted somebody who knew what they were doing. Chris was able to help save a lot of that money that my mom and dad both worked so hard for. I thought that everything would have to go to the nursing home, but it didn't. He was able to save us half of everything that would have gone if we hadn't contacted the Elder Care Firm. And we're all happy about that. Don't go to the nursing home without contacting Chris first.
Hello, I'm attorney Chris Berry. The Elder Care Firm is here to help you and your family find solutions. Call us today.
Protect your assets from probate, long-term care costs, the IRS, and get the governmental benefits you deserve. Visit theeldercarefirm.com today or call 810-214-3800. 810-214-3800.
And welcome back to the Chris Berry Show, where we talk wealth, estate, and tax planning for the second half of life to ensure that you have a safe and secure retirement and leave the legacy that you want. And on this segment, what we're going to do is we're going to get into some of the questions and answers that our listeners have. If you do have a question that you want us to take a shot at, you can give us a call anytime at 810-355-2584. Or you can email us at askchris@thechrisberryshow.com. And feel free, if you do have any questions for Kathy or any questions on that long-term care journey, feel free to reach out to us and we'll make sure that we get you in contact with Kathy. Now, with that, let's get into some of the questions. So the first question we have here is from Taylor. And so Taylor asks, can you tell me how a ladybird deed works? My mom has been in a nursing home for 28 days, and someone said I should make sure I have a ladybird deed for a house. Well, Taylor, I always caution people about the advice that they receive from kind of friends or people at the nursing home or even social workers or what you read online or Google because you never know whether that's the right advice for you. I always say that my role as an advisor, an attorney, and a counselor, all the information's out there, but we need to cut through all the BS, all the bad advice, and figure out what actually applies to you. So the question is about a ladybird deed, and your mom is in a nursing home. She's been in there for about 28 days, so most likely she was on Medicare and had Medicare cover 1 to 21 days, or 1 to 20 days with zero out of pocket. And then I'm guessing she's probably on a supplemental insurance plan, so she's still paying zero out of pocket. Because otherwise, Medicare, you'd have a copay of $169 per day. So I guess the question would be then, is mom going to remain in the nursing home after Medicare runs out, which would be the 100-day mark? Or is mom going home or going back to the independent living or assisted living? But that said, a ladybird deed probably does make sense in your situation. So this is one of those circumstances where the advice might be right, that it's not bad advice. So what a ladybird deed, how it works. Basically, what a ladybird deed is a beneficiary designation for your home. Or in this case, your mom's home. So what a ladybird deed says is that the home is in your name while you're alive, and then if you were to pass away, the ladybird deed follows kind of the language on the deed itself to say where it goes upon death. So in your situation, Taylor, let's just assume that you're an only child and mom wants this house to go to you and dad's not in the picture. We might do a ladybird deed that says it's in mom's name while she's alive, and then when she passes away, it goes to you, thereby avoiding probate. And then also, and this is very important, and this is probably why they suggested it, is that it avoids estate recovery as we have it today. So this takes a little bit more explanation. So let's say your mom were to stay in a nursing home, and at this point, maybe now she needs to qualify for Medicaid. Not Medicare, but Medicaid. And Medicaid is a governmental program that will pay for the nursing home cost. But to qualify for Medicaid, a single individual can only have $2,000 worth of countable assets. A married couple, they make you cut your assets in half. At most, you can have $120,000 of countable assets. And countable assets are basically, everything other than a home, small cash value of life insurance, personal belongings, prepaid funeral. Everything else is a countable asset. So, and then Medicaid also has a 5-year look-back period where they look back 5 years to see if you've made any transfers or if you've moved any money around. And if you have, they're going to then penalize you. So that's kind of how Medicaid works. And so I mentioned the home as an exempt asset, meaning they don't count your home while you're alive as long as it's below roughly $500,000. Now, I said while you're alive, because what happens when you pass away is that they can place a lien on your home to recover whatever they've paid out in benefits. So if your mom were to spend, say, 5 months in the nursing home and they paid out $40,000 worth of benefits through Medicaid, then they could place a lien on your mother's home for $40,000. Now, the way estate recovery works right now is they can only place a lien on the home if the home enters probate. So how do we avoid probate? Well, a lot of times what we do is we use the ladybird deed as a way to avoid probate with a home that not only avoids probate, but also it avoids the estate recovery as we have it today. So with that ladybird deed, we can kill two birds with one stone. And we do a ton of ladybird deeds in our office, even for just individuals in their basic estate planning, because the ladybird deed is a great way for a married couple to take care of their home, their property, without uncapping it for any property taxes, to make sure it avoids probate and maybe goes to the trust or whoever it's supposed to go to. So we do a ton of ladybird deeds. Really, the only time that we have real estate and we don't do a ladybird deed in our office is if we're deeding that home or that second piece of property or third property to a trust, to an asset protection trust. So even when we're doing a basic revocable living trust, we're still utilizing a ladybird deed as a way to get it there. If we're setting up an asset protection trust, we're deeding that property directly to the trust. So getting back to your situation with your mom in the nursing home, the ladybird deed makes a lot of sense in that situation because it's a way that we can avoid probate, avoid estate recovery, and make sure the deed gets where it's supposed to go. Now, if we were planning ahead, understand that these ladybird deeds might not work in the future. Because while we have estate recovery now, one of the things that Michigan may move towards, and this is one of those maybe upcoming changes in law, we may be moving towards enhanced estate recovery. And enhanced estate recovery is in a majority of the states around the United States. Majority, over 50% of the states have enhanced estate recovery. And all of the states around Michigan have enhanced estate recovery. And what enhanced estate recovery says is they're not going to place a lien on the home when the home enters probate. They're going to place a lien on the home when you enter the nursing home and apply for Medicaid. So what that means, Taylor, is that in your situation, if mom were to go on to Medicaid and need Medicaid to pay that cost of care, if we were in a situation where we had enhanced estate recovery, that ladybird deed would not work anymore because the lien happens when mom enters the nursing home, not when mom passes away. So if we're in a planning ahead situation where we think we might have 5 years before we are going to need nursing home care or Medicaid, instead of doing that ladybird deed, what we might do instead would be either a castle trust or a residence trust, where with this trust, if we can make it 5 years, because Medicaid has a 5-year look-back period, then that home would avoid probate as well as avoid the potential of estate recovery. Now remember, we don't have estate recovery yet, but I just see that as one of the things that Michigan will move towards, because almost every other state around Michigan, as well as a majority of the states in the United States, have enhanced estate recovery. And now we have to give kudos to Michigan, and I don't do this often, but we have to give kudos to the state of Michigan because they were actually the last state to adopt estate recovery. Because it was a federal mandate, because Medicaid is a joint state and federal program. So at the federal level, what they do is they put together the guidelines, and every state has to come up with the rules or the laws around that guideline. And so a number of years ago, the federal guidelines said every state has to have some form of estate recovery. And so Michigan was actually the last state, I want to say it was 2011, was the last state to adopt any form of estate recovery. And they adopted probably the most lenient form of estate recovery, the type that we have now that says they're only going to place a lien on any assets that end up going into probate, which typically is the house. And so that's where the ladybird deed avoids estate recovery as we have it now. But again, this is the lenient form of estate recovery. Shortly after estate recovery was passed in Michigan, someone proposed the bill, and I forget which of our senators or congressmen it was. I remembered it at the time, but I since forgotten. But one of our congressmen or senators had proposed enhanced estate recovery. And at the time, that bill had failed, but I see that as something that's going to pass at some point because a majority of the states have this enhanced estate recovery. And so long story short, the ladybird deed works now with our current legal environment of estate recovery. So if you do have a loved one that's in a nursing home or will not make it 5 years before they need nursing home level care, then we're going to do that ladybird deed. If we think they can make it 5 years or we're planning ahead or year-round retirements, I wouldn't recommend a ladybird deed as a way to protect the home. Instead, what we would want to do is either deed that property to our castle trust, which is a form of asset protection trust where we can protect your assets, not just your house, or maybe we set up a standalone retirement plan trust just to protect that residence. And not every attorney can do that. Not every firm can do that. So if you do want more information on the castle trust or the residence trust, or if you do want to learn more about protecting your home from probate, from long-term care costs, then I'd recommend you attend one of our clarity building workshops. We have these about once a week at one of our different locations, whether it's Brighton, Novi, Livonia, Bloomfield Hills, Ann Arbor, or Lansing. If you want more information on that, give us a call at 810-355-2584. Or you can go to our website, thechrisberryshow.com, where you can see a list of our upcoming workshops and also register for one of our upcoming workshops. Also at thechrisberryshow.com, one of the things that we started is a small little segment. We call it Barry's Bites, where I give short little 1 to 3 minutes talks, expert advice on specific topics. It's kind of fun, kind of quick and easy information on different topics, including ladybird deeds, estate planning versus elder law. And you can get some more information there at thechrisberryshow.com. So Taylor, hopefully that was helpful. Kind of went on a rant about ladybird deeds. I went deep there. That's almost a whole segment in itself. But a lot of people want to learn about ladybird deeds. One of the things that we have a website for our law practice, michiganestateplanning.com. So if you ever want some estate planning information, we link to that from our thechrisberryshow.com. But one of the most read articles we have on the website is actually talking about ladybird deeds in Michigan. And it's amazing. Every month, that's probably the topic that people search for the most and read the most on our website. So I thought it was important to spend some time talking about the ins and outs of ladybird deeds. It can be a little bit complicated. So again, ladybird deeds make sense now. Maybe if we're planning ahead in the future, if we were to go enhanced estate recovery, the ladybird deed probably isn't the best option, and I don't think it will be grandfathered in. Meaning if you do a ladybird today and they do make this change in law, this is one of those situations where I don't think there'll be any grandfathering. So it's going to be important to start that 5-year clock ticking for the long-term care costs, where you put that house or even multiple properties into a residence trust or that castle trust. So that's about 10 minutes on the ladybird deed. Now we're going to spend some time getting into some of our other questions. So this is a question on a follow-up of some of our Alzheimer's and dementia shows we've had previously on the Chris Berry Show. How can I force my spouse to see a doctor regarding an Alzheimer's determination? And this is from Brad. My spouse's mother and brother passed away from Alzheimer's. My spouse refuses to see a doctor. She's starting to become very forgetful. My spouse has many of the symptoms. Can I legally force the doctor appointment? And so, Brad, this is a tough situation. Because someone may be showing signs of dementia or Alzheimer's, that doesn't take away their independence. And one of the things I'd recommend is do some research surrounding Alzheimer's and dementia. Just because someone's forgetting where the keys are, that doesn't mean they have Alzheimer's dementia. In fact, we've done a workshop with 10 early warning signs of Alzheimer's. And if you listen to past shows, whether it's the Maggie Gibbons show, or even on this show, Kathy talks a little bit about it, or Dr. Bruno, who is an expert when it comes to dementia and Alzheimer's research. Take a listen to some of our past episodes. It's going to provide some insights with things to think about and steps you can take. But keep in mind that person is an individual, and they still have their individual rights. So I wouldn't look at forcing your spouse to take that step. Because even if they were to get that diagnosis, what's that really going to change for you? From a legal standpoint, what I would focus on is making sure that we do have things like powers of attorney in place now. I guess you are going to have situations surrounding driving potentially, and a conversation about when maybe your spouse should stop driving. Those are going to be a lot of tough conversations. I might recommend you reach out to the Alzheimer's Association. And if you listen to some of our past episodes, we've provided a lot of resources for caregivers, for those who are going through this elder care journey, on how best to have those conversations. Because especially with regards to driving and taking away the keys, you're really taking away someone's independence. But to answer your question specifically, really the only way you could force someone would be to get courts involved, maybe an emergency hearing. But I really recommend you try to avoid forcing someone to take that step. There's less invasive ways. Maybe it's a conversation with the primary care physician at the next checkup. I would look at other alternatives other than trying to force someone to take that step of a potential diagnosis. Because again, what would that diagnosis change? So, Brad, it's a tough situation you're in, and hopefully that's helpful. And that's going to be it for the questions this week. Sorry I only got to 2. We will do some more in our future episodes, and I'm very excited. Join us next week as we're going to have Matt Sova talking about some tax changes. So join us next week on The Chris Berry Show. Make it a great week. Take care.
Learn more about Chris Berry and how he can help your family by visiting online at thechrisberryshow.com. That's thechrisberryshow.com. You can also call Chris Berry at 810-355-2584. That's 810-355-2584. This program content reflects the opinions of Chris Berry and his guests, not the elder care firm Prosperity Capital Advisors or the CJ Berry Group, and is subject to change at any time without notice. Content provided herein is for informational purposes only and should not be used or construed as investment or legal advice or a recommendation regarding the purchase or sale of any security or to follow any legal or tax strategy. There's no guarantee that the strategist's statements, opinions, or forecasts provided herein will prove to be correct. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Indices are not available for direct investment. Any investor who attempts to mimic the performance of an index would incur fees and expenses which would reduce returns. All investing involves risk, including the potential for loss of principal. There's no guarantee that any investment plan or strategy will be successful. We recommend that you consult with a professional dedicated to your needs. This program is furnished by the Elder Care Firm.
The cost of long-term care can be overwhelming. If you're dealing with long-term care costs, make plans to attend the next free informative workshop from the Elder Care Firm in Brighton. They'll show you how to protect your hard-earned assets and obtain the governmental benefits you deserve, including veterans benefits and Medicaid.
Hello, I'm attorney Chris Berry. As the only certified elder law attorney in Livingston County, I have the knowledge and estate planning strategies to help you. When you call, reserve your seat at our next workshop or schedule a free free 15-minute phone consultation. The Elder Care Firm is here to help you and your family find solutions. Call us today.
Spots are filling up for the next free Elder Care Firm workshop. Reserve your seat today by calling 810-214-3800 or visit theeldercarefirm.com. The Elder Care Firm also invites you to join them at this year's Walk to End Alzheimer's. The walk is on Saturday, October 1st in downtown Brighton. Call 810-214-3800 today.